Hey there, welcome to part one of the 10-part Future Ready Fiber Networks webinar series hosted by our friends at eX² Technology and Vivacity Infrastructure Group. I'm Dean Perrine, Executive Vice President of JSA. Welcome to our viewers. This series brings together industry thought leaders, fiber network experts, and network owners who are driving progress in the design, build, and delivery of future ready fiber networks. In today's kickoff session, we'll examine the key forces propelling the fiber industry forward, from next-gen technologies and funding strategies to fiber's role in supporting future networks. A couple of quick housekeeping notes. Go ahead and feel free to type questions into the chat box throughout the webinar if you have any questions, and we'll do our best, of course, to get through all of those questions or as many as possible in the allotted time. If we don't have time to answer your questions, we invite you to join us at the eX² Technology LinkedIn page after the event, where we will happily address any outstanding questions. We will also be sharing the link to the post-event LinkedIn discussion right in the chat box, so be on the lookout for that. All right, let's go ahead and get started, and we'll meet these good-looking folks who are going to talk to you today. I am pleased to introduce our expert speakers for today's virtual roundtable. They are Kris Rabii. Kris is the CEO at Vivacity Infrastructure Group. We have Kara Lively. Kara is the Director of Economic Development for the Atlanta Beltline Inc. And then finally, we have Christopher Tobbe. Christopher is the CIO of Livingston County, Michigan. All right, let's jump right in here. The fiber industry has experienced exponential growth in recent years, with next generation technologies driving demand and various federal and state programs advancing the expansion of broadband infrastructure. During the planning and development, network owners need to balance cost with future growing needs, including the role of fiber networks that the fiber networks will play in supporting future initiatives. Successful network deployments are more critical for enabling the future of connectivity than ever before in our history. So we're going to jump right in. And Kris, this first one is for you. Let's set the stage with some market trends. What is it that you see as the key drivers of growth in the fiber industry over the next 3 to 5 years?
Well, thank you. Yeah, and it's a very interesting time in our industry. Some people like to use the word generational opportunity here, and maybe not so grandiose. But I'd say, without breaking any news here, I'd say the key contributor, probably two main things. I'd say expansion of fiber broadband to serve more locations is just one of the most significant drivers we've seen in a long time. And that trend has kind of come into focus since COVID, really,
Mhm.
where I think it exposed the importance of having reliable, high speed broadband, which in my words means a fiber broadband connection. I know some
Mhm.
people could probably have a discussion around that. But I'd say, despite all the effort that's gone into deploying fiber broadband over the last handful of years, and maybe even before that for some of the companies that were more future thinking, current estimates have national fiber penetration, in the terms of homes passed anyway, is somewhere only in the 50 to 60% range,
Mm.
which is really interesting to me. Last time I kind of looked at that stat was a few months ago, and you'd think with all this kind of stuff we've been hearing over the last handful of years that we'd be further along than that. But it's a big country, right? And I've had the opportunity to give talks here and there, and I say that stat, and some people find it very hard to believe. But for those of us, myself included, who live in a major metropolitan area, I think you get a slightly distorted sense of what the rest of the country is doing. And we have
Mm.
thankfully a big rural, diverse country, and there's many, many homes unserved by fiber, and that's a story you can really get after when looking at the broadband deployment map. So that's kind of, I would say, driver one. And there are so many, and we can talk a little bit about this later, but a number of government subsidy programs in play,
Mhm.
a whole alphabet soup of them, where real networks are being built, actually money being spent today. But, the big one in the BEAD program is not yet here, putting meaningful dollars to work yet. And once that eventually arrives, I think it's going to propel growth for the next 3 to 5 years easily, as the states deploy that, out into the field. I'd say that the second big one, again, it's you'd have to be living under a rock not to hear about it, but the ramp up of AI, cloud, machine learning are again driving a real generational cycle of investment in hyperscale data centers in particular.
Mhm.
The good news about hyperscale data centers for those of us who are in telecom and build fiber networks for a living is they need connectivity and massive connectivity. I'd say AI training workloads and other demands are pushing the limits of legacy deployed fiber infrastructure, which is a completely different deployment cycle than the one I previously mentioned in terms of fiber to the home. But I'm of the belief that this is likely to drive a full scale rebuild of the long haul infrastructure to provide the capacity these large hyperscale players are going to need. And I think the other piece of it, and I can kind of talk about it later when we get into it,
Mhm.
is that the AI cycle is evolving as we speak, right? So what these hyperscale data center operators and AI operators are going to need is going to change over time, and I think that's something that's going to be interesting to watch. But we'll certainly put fuel to the fire in terms of fiber demand.
Excellent. Kris, you could not have set the stage for the rest of this webinar better if you had tried. I appreciate that very much. And because you mentioned some of the government funding and some AI, we're going to jump right into that. Again, sticking with you, Kris, how are government funding, loans, and private investments influencing the current market dynamics, and what trends are emerging as states and communities prepare for large-scale fiber deployments?
Yeah, that's a good question, and one I think about a lot. Right? I mean, I think there's over the past handful of years, at some point when fiber became considered an infrastructure investment for private equity and other banks, it's kind of opened a whole world of new people willing to put money into fiber. I think that is definitely,
Mhm.
not to overuse the word fuel to the fire, but certainly added a lot there. And as I kind of touched on, government subsidy money is really flowing as well. I think one of the most notable outcomes from my perspective is that the government subsidy money in particular allows state and county local governments and people I would traditionally label as non-typical network owners, meaning back there was a point in time where the only people who own networks were big carriers,
Mhm.
AT&T, Verizon, Ma Bell, whoever, right? But now I think with the subsidy money, it's allowing the local communities to take control over their fiber broadband future. I think is a really interesting development because, and some of the other kind of webinar participants here might have comments on that. But I think the commercial approach to fiber deployment in communities has not always been what's best for the community. It's what's best for the business deploying the
Mhm.
capital, right? So I think this is a really interesting opportunity to let the communities, whether it's a community or a county or a state, I'll put them all kind of in the same bucket, to take a little bit more control over that outcome. And candidly, that's been beneficial for Vivacity because we're a great partner for entities like that, because I feel like we can provide the turnkey services that entities need who aren't traditional network owners. And I think that's an interesting dynamic that's changed recently. I'd say, it's also, I wouldn't say it's all been amazing, right? I mean, I think
Mhm.
the flood of funding into the space has kind of, like most opportunities, encouraged people to say, I'm going to run out there and plant my flag. That's an
Yeah.
opportunity I can't miss. Whether you want to liken it to the gold rush or whatever, go put your shovel in the ground and claim that spot of land. I think a little bit of that has happened, and there have been some really successful implementations, but there are also some that have struggled. And I think that states and communities are better prepared now, to how to find capable partners, how to do things the right way, not how to not make the mistakes in the past. And I think that stuff all bodes really well for the future. I think as the fiber to the home business matures, I think people realize it's not quite so simple as just going out there building a bunch of homes passed and then trying to turn around and monetize your business. You have to operate a business, you have to have customer service, you have to do a bunch of other things that maybe it's not so obvious when you embark down the road of just building a network. So
Excellent, Kris. Thank you. Kara, Christopher, anything to add there?
Yeah, I would just say that, from a municipal standpoint, I mean, this is an area where we've generally not ventured into. And for municipalities, we've been all about, infrastructure and services. And so venturing into this area is a little bit unique and requires a different mindset and a different skill set to venture into it.
Yeah, and I'll just agree with Christopher. Atlanta Beltline, we already are in the infrastructure business, right? We're executing a trail and transit project. And the foresight to include conduit and fiber network in partnership with eX² and Vivacity has been just a very interesting P3 model for us. And for us, it's part of our sustainability plan, right? So the opportunity to have new revenue streams to support this amazing infrastructure we're building for our city has just been a really innovative model, I think.
Excellent. Thank you so much. Moving along, nobody nobody escapes the webinar without talking about AI, and we've already kind of dropped that at least once on the webinar so far. So that we're going to stick with the technology innovation and network design tip here. And Kris, we will stick with you. How is the integration of AI, machine learning, automation, and other next gen technologies impacting fiber network design and deployment?
Yeah, Dean, as I alluded to one of the prior comments, I mean, it's certainly driving aggregate fiber demand. I think one of the most interesting things to me, I mean, I've either fortunately or unfortunately been doing this telecom thing for 25 years, makes me feel old, but it was certainly a different place back in
Mhm.
kind of the late 90s when I first got into telecom. But one of the things that I'd say is most notable is that, back in, let's say, 1999, 2000, it was the pre dot-com boom and bust era. All the internet traffic came and went from large population centers. I mean,
Yeah.
you could go and look at the top half of the quote unquote NFL cities and say that's going to be big time. New York, Washington, D.C., Chicago, Dallas, all across the map. I think one thing that's happened, and from, unintended, but I guess it certainly makes sense in hindsight, is that the tail so and so like kind of wags the dog here, where hyperscale data center deployment has evolved. Instead of like, I'm going to put a data center where the network is, I'm going to find some cheap land that has available power, and then I will figure out the connectivity later.
Mhm.
And with the scale of investment, it's a natural thing to say, look, I'm going to go solve my biggest problem first, and then I'm going to kind of prioritize how I solve my other ones. Getting the gigawatts of power these guys need is the number one problem, and
Yeah.
finding a piece of land that can house a data center or a data center campus, which can be hundreds of acres now, has resulted in these campuses finding themselves in places that are off the beaten path. And I say that like lightly, but it is some weird places.
Mhm.
Think you would have such a focus there. And I think what that means then is you're going to have to build a new infrastructure from a fiber and telecom perspective to take the kind of tons and tons of bandwidth these guys are generating daily and will continue to generate for the foreseeable future. Some of those places, places like Atlanta are big cities and they will benefit from this, but some of the other ones are off the beaten path.
Mhm.
Um, as a lot of people like to say, I think the AI machine learning game is still in the early innings. And there's a lot left to play out, both in terms of the initial kind of core deployment. But I think, people like to start using the word inference is a different kind of stage of AI and machine learning. And when I first heard that word, I'm like, what does that even mean? But it's when the smarts that we're building in AI become used in kind of practical real world applications. And I think that is, logically going to create a different burden on the fiber networks and just the telecom infrastructure we're building. Because as I mean, look, big data centers can talk to each other, and you have kind of the interstates, if you will, that connect them all together. But when the people in the businesses, whether it could be something as simple as like, well, I say simple, automated transportation, you need really real time, kind of very latency sensitive connectivity to the
Mhm.
smarts. And I feel like that's going to necessitate a slightly different infrastructure as the kind of AI infrastructure game evolves. Yeah, so I think that's one of the things that I feel like is going to affect how networks are designed and implemented for sure.
Okay, network design. Great segue into the next question, but I do want to go back to some of the AI and machine learning items that you unpacked there in just a moment. But with regard to kind of the changing in how in construction methods and things like that, what new fiber developments or construction methods are you seeing, and how are they influencing the network deployments?
Yeah, I mean, look, that's a good question, and it's something I went to school and I got a degree in engineering, intending to do research. I found myself, like I said, 25 years later, not doing much research related, but I had an opportunity to give a talk at my alma mater at Rutgers University in April, and I kind of went back and refreshed. I'm like, what is going on with fiber?
Hmm.
And while I don't spend a lot of time on the research end of things, I was surprised to see that there have been some very interesting developments in the fiber itself. I mean, not to get too into the technical weeds, but there, multi-core fibers, hollow core fibers. Some of the recent developments are very cool, and just kind of reminded me that the march of technology goes on, even though we treat this as infrastructure. The vast majority of standard single mode stuff that we're deploying is more or less the same as it's been for the last 20 years. But there's some new technology on the horizon. I think, to Kara's point, I mean, people who are putting duct in the ground are doing that for optionality, not just for capacity, but for optionality. When new technologies come around, they're going to have a relatively easy place to put that new technology without having to dig up the ground again. So it's very, a lot of forethought there. The other thing I think is, remarkable when you think about it, looking back over time, is just the developments that have happened in the area of cabling technology. When I first got started, a 432 count cable was like mind-bogglingly huge. And that means there was 432 fibers in a sheet that's roughly an inch across. And nowadays, the advances these cabling manufacturers have made are really truly amazing, both with the structure of the cable themselves and how the ribbons are created. They can do cable counts as high as 3,456 or even 6,912 in one cable, roughly the same size as the ones that had 432 fibers in. And it just goes to show, if people are putting nearly 7,000 fibers in one sheath, like the level of consumption they anticipate is really, it's pushing the edge of technology. And it's really amazing to see how that is, affecting the kind of network and technology we're deploying into the ground today. And more to come, undoubtedly, right? I mean, the stuff that's here
Yeah.
today is, the things on the horizon will boggle the mind even more.
Yeah, and it boggles my mind. I graduated from college in 1997, and I remember vividly having going on a college tour and having the tour guide just boasting about this 1.544 T1 connection into the entire dorm, and we were all like drooling over that, thinking that it couldn't possibly get any bigger or better or faster than that. And wow, how
Yeah.
times have changed.
Yeah.
Before we move from the AI machine learning discussion and kind of the innovations with regard to construction methods, Kara, Christopher, anything to add on Chris's points?
Yeah, I can, it's really amazing. I mean, we look back over the years and, I put a fiber optic cabling system into a park system years ago, and probably early 2000s, and we were getting, 10 meg through that, and we were just smoking.
Yeah.
And the innovations in fiber comes from the ability to network and increase the speed and the capacity, and that comes down to the manufacturing capabilities, the different technologies. I mean, now they're able to pass multi-gigabit technologies through, and the same fibers that are in the ground from years ago, and you don't have the degradation that you have with copper. And
Hmm.
I remember being really excited as well, guys, about the bonded T1 for voice channel and data channel, and it was like, whoa. But some of the other innovative technologies are the massive advancements in directional drilling, and what they're capable of doing in congested right-of-ways. I also sit as the city council member in the city of Brighton, Michigan here, and the current mayor. And the right-of-ways are getting very, very congested very fast, because there's so much going in there. And so finding ways using the directional drilling that is minimally invasive for the communities is a huge change. I mean, back, 20 years ago, it was all trenching, and
Yeah.
the drills and the drill operators are just doing amazing things.
Yeah, it's a good call out. Good call out.
Yeah. Kara,
Yeah, and
anything?
I'll just say on our end, we're really thinking about as we are putting technologies on the Beltline. We've been very cautious not to put disparate technologies, just throw in technology on the trail, right? And so we're working with eX² and some other partners to really think thoughtfully about an IoT brain that really can help us form kind of a command center, so that we're using AI to see projections of future trail users, and really leverage all this new technology to better serve people on the trail, but also really forecast our needs from a lot of different perspectives, from trash usage to public safety. So all of the advancements are really going to help us as we manage technology and manage all the people that are coming to the trail as well.
I love it, Kara. Thank you very much. And you all must have gotten together before this webinar to say we're going to provide these transitions for Dean, because you couldn't do it any better than you are. Kara, we're going to stick with you specifically regarding the Atlanta Beltline, and that you all have been doing a lot of work to further develop the smart city and digital equity initiatives in downtown Atlanta. So why don't you tell our viewers a bit more about those initiatives?
Absolutely. So first of all, the Atlanta Beltline is a 22-mile trail and transit project. It was really born out of a thesis statement out of Georgia Tech here in Atlanta. And we have these four disconnected old railroads. It's industry moved out of the city. This was really an initiative to reconnect our city through a trail and transit network. These railroads had really divided our city, right? So this is an opportunity to bring people together. It goes through 45 neighborhoods. We have about 160,000 residents within a half mile of the 22-mile loop. So, about a half a mile from downtown, but solely and completely within our in-town neighborhoods, Buckhead to Bankhead, we like to say. So some of our highest socioeconomics and some of our lowest socioeconomics. So we have a real mandate for this to be a project for the people here in Atlanta. And so you can imagine this infrastructure is a great opportunity for businesses. And so this is adding the digital equity piece and this economic mobility piece through technology, I think is super innovative. We put out an RFP to find eX² Vivacity, and brought on this amazing P3 partnership where they have helped us build a contiguous 16-mile smiley face, if you will. It's a Monday morning. So 16-mile U of conduit and fiber infrastructure. And so once that was in place, we've been able to really leverage that for, like I said earlier, new revenue streams to better support our project. Especially our main funding mechanism doesn't allow for maintenance dollars. And we all know that's a huge need for a lot of these major public infrastructure projects. So we're really excited about that. But now that it's in place, we have an incredible opportunity to really leverage the technology and the infrastructure, the conduit infrastructure, for economic opportunity, better user experience for people on the Beltline. Think about, the hope is a 22-mile public Wi-Fi network, and we have about 20 Atlanta schools within a half mile of the trail. So you think about the opportunity for students and small businesses to access public Wi-Fi, but also just helping to enhance that user experiences with digital kiosks, the ability for users on the Beltline to connect with small businesses that are just off the trail. But smart lighting is down the road. Hopefully, it enables us to do smart waste management. smart irrigation. So the possibilities are endless. And then again, having this IoT brain, this command center that really helps us bring all the data points into one place for forecasting and modeling, so that we can be smarter in the way we manage our resources. So we're really excited about the opportunities that, just putting in that fiber and conduit infrastructure are leveraging for our community.
That's all very, very exciting stuff. We certainly would love to see more of that across the country. But let's go ahead and why don't you walk us through how Livingston County kind of approached its overall broadband expansion strategy, and how your new middle mile infrastructure will support the community's growth over the next 2, 5, 10 years.
Yeah, here in Livingston County, our system came out of COVID. Our system came out of a $12.5 million investment of ARPA dollars that our Board of Commissioners decided, hey, we want to put some resources down and put some funds down to this because none of these projects get started without any funding to go back. This is one of those larger government projects. The money was allowed to be used for middle mile. We did a in-depth research study on what we had here in Livingston County. And just to kind of backtrack a little bit, Livingston County is kind of a unique spot. We're kind of the bullseye in the middle of the state here. We are nestled right between Detroit and Lansing, Ann Arbor and Flint, Michigan.
Mhm.
We're about one county out from each of those different areas. Two major highways that crisscross through the state run right through Livingston County, I-96 and US 23. And what we have here is a good mix of suburban and rural areas. And what we found here was that most of the carriers stuck to those, traditional areas that were, highly more dense and could do more. And our rural areas, and they couldn't get good internet there. So we measured that. We worked with our GIS teams. We did a full RFP and brought on the Vivacity eX² team, which has just been a dream to work with as far as partners go. Can't say enough for what they've done and how they establish themselves. When they put down what they say they're going to do, they're going to execute and take good quality care of their customers. So we've built about 100-mile fiber and conduit system here in Livingston County, and it creates a number of concentric rings that don't exactly, create a bullseye circle around each area. But again, we're future proofing our community for advancements in technology. We're putting in the middle mile infrastructure for the carriers to be able to come in and use, as well as our system is designed to be used for public safety, education, and municipal networks. And now that we're nearing our last 3 to 5% of our project here, we are ready to roll and start connecting places in Livingston County. We've talked to different municipalities about all sorts of different options and opportunities out there. It's great to see Kira laying down the whole smart city applications out there. I'll probably be in touch in regard to that and learning more about it. But the opportunity to get fiber into our communities in large capacities of it. Thanks to the team at eX², we took you know, two 1.25-inch conduit and we turned it into 8, miraculously. And that gives us a huge opportunity to commercialize our project and really deliver advanced fiber technologies and, do a lot here in Livingston County. And to dive back into the AI and data center, with the way that Livingston County is laid out, we believe that our fiber system, our transportation infrastructure, as well as the location of Livingston County is an ideal spot for AI and large data center expansions.
I love it. Again, all very, very exciting stuff. Kara and Christopher, I'm going to stick with you for a little while. So far, we have been really highlighting the benefits and all of the amazing things that will come as a result of this massive project that you have all been working on. But it certainly will come with its share of challenges and maintenance initiatives and things like that. So while owning a network provides numerous benefits, as we've been discussing, operating and maintaining community-owned networks is a cost item that sometimes gets overlooked during the development phase. So what are you as network owners doing to prepare to offset or manage these costs?
Yeah, well, I will say for us, we have a kind of our customers that we now work with and bring to the table to use our infrastructure. We've worked with eX² to have kind of a cost sharing pro forma with those customers, which I think is really smart and a best practice, right? So that helps us offset costs, and the more customers that we bring to the table, it continues to offset costs. So that's a huge value point to the way we've structured these deals. But I'd also say too, I mentioned earlier, our traditional funding mechanism for the Beltline project itself doesn't have the ability to really operate and so handle the O&M dollars. And so, it's been really important for us to really think of this as a business performer, right? So we're really thinking about every technology that we're adding to the trail has some sort of revenue component, so that it can cover not only maybe some of the capital expenditure of that technology, but also help with the ongoing maintenance and costs of that technology itself, as well as the system. So I think those are some of the things that I think the main point is just don't ignore that those costs are coming. We build it into the budget on the front end. And I would say that I think eX² and Vivacity have been, really thoughtful in the way they have helped us do that. So making sure that there's no stone unturned with some of these these costs that are going to come down the pike. So for everything that we're going to be deploying, I know every single dime that is coming over the next decade, right? So they've been a very thorough thought partner for us as we think about the full breadth and costs of the initiative, which I think is really critical.
Very good. Christopher, anything to add there?
Yeah, Livingston County jointly owned a 70-mile aerial network with our local ISD and our local school systems before. And we've changed that up and gone to a complete 100% underground system here. And what I traded in pole fee rentals, I am now allocating for missed digs. So much similar to Kira, as we bring on different partners, we're doing a cost share with those, allocating out maintenance costs on an annual basis, and then also looking at IRUs with private companies, other public entities to help to offset those costs. We went, like I say, from being an aerial system to an underground system, and our missed digs have gone up about 300%. Um, in the time here. So we had a little bit of underground, and now we have a lot of underground. So
Very,
Yeah,
very good. Go ahead.
sorry, I'm just going to say, I mean, that Kara and Chris are, I'd say ahead of the curve and forward thinking in this regard. I think I'm glad, Dean, you asked the question, right? Because there's a bunch of, I'd say, municipalities and communities that don't have the benefit of people who are thinking that far ahead. And I think it's a huge part of asset ownership is thinking about once the last shovel is put away from the initial build, what happens? So
Yeah.
good stuff to think about.
No, Kris, amazing point. And which again leads to my favorite question of the entire webinar right now, and I imagine most of our viewers are waiting for as well, is what did we learn? What knowledge can you all impart on to others with regard to this project, and what would you consider some of the non-negotiables in your fiber planning for future ready cities and counties? This is open to anyone. Carol, we'll start with you.
Yeah, great. I'd say just, there's got to be an openness to the flexibility of the market, right? So, I think we came into this really thinking dark fiber, that was going to be a really great opportunity for us. And it is and will continue to be, but conduit RUs and sales have been even better just as the market changes. And I think, again, the value that eX² and Vivacity are bringing to us is that expertise. They're out in the market, they're hearing kind of the latest trends. And so those their ear to the ground is helping us be very responsive to the market so that we can take advantage of opportunities and be flexible. But I would also say, as I mentioned, for us, it's I think where some smart cities initiatives have gone not as well as, they're not grounded in community engagement. So we did take really this past year to talk to the community to understand what are some of the urban issues they're facing, whether it be food access or health access or access to broadband. Those conversations helped shape our scope of work for the next year ahead of World Cup, which is also really exciting, right? And so I think just really understanding, how we can use technology on the Beltline to address the issues our communities are facing has been a huge opportunity to get buy-in, which will ensure the success of the initiative. And again, not just throwing cool technology on the trail for technology's sake, but having it grounded within that community feedback. And then having, like I said, some sort of IoT brain or something that's going to bring all of that data together so that you're really looking comprehensively and thoughtfully in the ways you're rolling out technology throughout your infrastructure project, I think is critical. Another final thing I'll note is, we've also been really committed to owning the data. And so we know that is going to be a huge value proposition for us as we continue to grow our program. So we've just been very focused on that and making sure that we're really in the driver's seat when it comes to the data that we'll be collecting as part of this project.
Excellent. Kara, thank you so much. Christopher?
Yeah, much like Kara said, conduit. We also went into this looking at, dark fiber, and we've made the revision thanks to being nimble and quick on our feet with the eX² team. The other thing is having partners that you can trust, partners that you can rely upon, and partners that you can, have open conversation and dialogue with. Part of the reason that we went from a 2 conduit to a 6 to an 8 conduit system is solely because we had a very open and transparent conversation with our VP of sales over at eX², Amanda Borat, and she brought some of the new technologies that she was seeing to the table here. But you've got to be open, you've got to be flexible, and just know there will be ups and downs with any kind of build. It is not going to be crystal clear, smooth sailing, and things that you think are materializing could fall apart in an instant. Again, relying on good, solid partners like eX² to be able to, help you navigate those waters are so critical when you're coming in from an outside organization that's never built something this big. So,
Christopher, great points, and that level of transparency is kind of rare, unfortunately. So it's great that we're talking about it. And Kris, they can't stop gushing over some of the work that you're doing over there.
I'm blushing. I mean, well, look, all kidding aside, I think it is. I mean, the importance of having a good partnership can't be overstated. Because as Christopher just said, things will not always go smoothly. I mean, I never, I'm doing this network building things for a long time. I would never stand in front of a customer and say, I promise you we will do everything perfectly. Because, there's always things that, best intentions, you still make a mistake. There's so many factors outside your control because building networks, it's like a chaotic thing as much as we like to plan it out, whether it's environmental things or, there's utilities in the way where you didn't expect them. You have to have a good open relationship. I think that to me is so important. I'm glad you said that.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Me too. Gosh, so many more questions I could be asking, but unfortunately, we're getting ready to wrap some things up here. So, final question to everyone. Um, what final bit of advice would you offer communities or private partners looking to future proof their connectivity strategies? And Kris, we ended with you, and let's go ahead and start with you on this final question.
All right. Well, look, I think the good news is, I mean, honestly, we've covered a lot of what I was going to say to this question. Really, it's first thing that came to mind when I was thinking about this is have a champion or an evangelist. And we happen to be on a call with a couple of really great evangelists and Kris and Kara. But when you go through any complicated project, like I said, things are not always going to go smoothly. You're going to need somebody internal to whether it's the company or the community that is running the project to be the torchbearer and say, don't forget why we're doing this. And Kara mentioned a second ago, whether it's things like community engagement, people are like, why are you digging up the streets? Or why are we spending all this money on this? And people have to be there constantly reminding their constituents that there are benefits here. This is why we're doing it. And, because there's a lot of potholes along the way, especially in kind of P3 undertakings where politics, for better or worse, are always going to be a part of it. And people will like to kind of throw darts at things. So you need to have somebody who's a real champion of the project, because otherwise I feel a lot of them kind of can lose their way, halfway through implementation. We certainly already kind of hit this, but pick partners you can trust, because things will not always go smoothly, and you need to have somebody who you can sit across the table from and say, I need better, and help me understand what happened here. So I think we've covered that one. The other thing we thankfully hit on is don't neglect to plan for the long-term care and feeding of the network. O&M, or operations and maintenance cost, is real. Just like all of us who may own houses, you think, all right, well, I can go and buy that house. This is the mortgage I can afford and the tax and all that stuff. But then, what, the house, they're all money pits, right? And I won't say networks are quite the same, but they do have a cost to them. And if you don't think about that from a budget perspective or a P&L perspective, as Kara mentioned, it's like you're kind of in for a little bit of a rude awakening. And kind of tying into that, I'd say commercialization, which is my more fancy word of saying, well, let's get some customers to put on this network to help pay for the thing, should not be overlooked. And it's perhaps daunting when your business is not to be out there selling network. Your business is to run a community or run a technology office inside a community. You're not out there knocking on the doors of all the potential buyers. So find somebody who can work with you to help commercialize your asset. The opportunities that might exist for ABI in Atlanta are not going to be the same that exist for Livingston County, but they are still opportunities there. You've got to be able to kind of go turn over stones until you find all the right things and drive as much value onto the network. And, ideally with all the, forward thinking that's going on here, that with the optionality, whether it's fiber or conduit or whatever the infrastructure is, could even be space and power in your community, because these entities are going to need those to light the fiber. I think it's just, think ahead and kind of try to preserve that flexibility and how you go back to commercialize it. But those would be my couple of tidbits from my perspective.
So many great points there, Kris. And I'm just going to, I've got a couple of questions because of some of your answers. And these questions are for everyone as well. But everyone, at least one time during this webinar, has said the word community. And I do believe that is becoming kind of the 800-pound gorilla in the room. And that is as these networks expand into, we'll call it the kind of the residential edge, data centers, kind of as you were mentioning, they're kind of coming from these metropolitan areas into these more residential and rural type areas. It presents a new, unique set of challenges. And it seems to me like you are all seeing those challenges and also addressing those challenges kind of in real time as they happen. Is that true?
From my perspective, yes. I mean, we are changing how things are done. And with that, it's going to be an unpredictable set of challenges, but you see them, you knock them down. That's partially experienced and being nimble and that kind of thing. That's definitely what we're doing from my
Christopher,
perspective. Anyway.
Christopher, you're shaking your head. I assume you agree.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, being nimble, and going back to what Kris said earlier, with the amount of different carriers coming out there and planting the flags and putting their shovel in the ground, like, there's so much that's happening with the expansion and different companies wanting to go in different places. Understanding the right of ways for communities is huge.
Yeah.
Knowing what you have, knowing where you have it, and looking at innovative technologies and innovative ways to do things. Those are critical elements that you can put in place. And the great thing about doing an underground network is that it's kind of like a bump and run. You can pothole, and they can drill 1,000, 2,000 feet, sometimes even longer, and then move on to the next pothole and pull, and they're in and out very, very quickly. uh, Between that and the hydro excavating, like, these things can actually go really, really fast and be minimally invasive for communities. You just need to have good, trustworthy partners. Now, that doesn't mean that your drilling crews aren't going to hit an occasional sewer line.
Mhm.
uh, of all the sewer lines that we hit on our project, we hit the sewer line to the county administration building. uh, Bored those conduits right through
Right to
it.
the top.
Yep, yep, yep. That was an enlightening day of scoping that line. Oops. But trusted partners, trusted crews. You know, don't go for the bottom of the barrel low bid contract. Go for quality. Quality is critical in doing underground and infrastructure projects.
Excellent, Christopher. Thank you. And Kara, you have the final word.
Yeah, I would echo that. In this quasi-governmental space that we're in, Christopher's in the government space, we're a little risk adverse.
Yeah.
So, I think really thinking about future proofing this strategy has been important to our community and our stakeholders. And I think the cycle approach that we're taking, so again, starting kind of with that community engagement, working with them to create kind of a scope of work that we're going to put in place over the next 24 months. And then going back to community engagement is really going to set us up for success, I think, here in Atlanta. But again, just having those driving value and benefit for the community through the work we're doing. So hopefully one day there's Beltline fiber that's going to our workforce housing units, right? And we're providing affordable internet off the Beltline through a partner. So again, just really trying to be innovative in the ways that technology can address the issues we're all facing in our communities across America.
I love it, Karen. I wish that Beltline extended to Northwest Indiana, where I am. I would love to have some fiber in my backyard about right now. But anyway, that is our time. Thank you all very much for the engaging conversation. I can't thank you enough for being here, and thank you to our attendees as well, and to eX² Technology and Vivacity Infrastructure Group. We'll see you all very soon.